Hi, welcome back. This week I am starting a new commission and it's a landscape, which is exciting. But first of all, I'm going to show you a commission that I've finished. I finished it a couple of weeks ago, but I couldn't show you because it was commissioned as a gift for someone else. So until the third person got the gift, I couldn't show you it just in case they saw this video, because it is someone I know. But also I'd prefer not to spoil someone's birthday present. So anyway, even if I didn't know them. So I'll show you that first. That was just a little dart frog. I really enjoyed doing it. It's a bit different. I've never painted a frog for someone before. So the person that commissioned it just sort of said, could you paint a frog? And I was like, just a frog? Do you just want a frog? How big do you want it? So whenever I do a commission with someone, I sort of say, like, what sort of size do you want? What's the sort of vibe you want? Things like that. Some people don't know. They just say, well, I say trust me. They just trust me to get on with it. And tell them what I think is best. If they'd have wanted a tiny little painting of a frog, absolutely could have done that, but they wanted it to go on a wall, so they wanted it a good size, really. And anyway, I'm now working on another commission which is entirely different. So if you see here, I'm sat at my easel and we've got this long canvas. Got a long canvas, we've got the reference image up there, and it's a bit of a bad printout. The actual image is better, but I thought I'd tell you about the process of starting this commission. Every commission is different. Like I say, some people just sort of give you a photograph and say, can you paint that on a canvas? And you're like, yeah, no problem. Some people say, I've got an idea, I'm not sure how to communicate it, let's work together on that. And some people say, can you paint me a something? And I go, yeah, we can do that. But whatever it is, I work together with the client, the person that has commissioned it, to make sure that they're getting what they want out of it. And also, if it's not something I can do, I will say I can't do this, but I probably know someone that can. I occasionally get asked to do portraits. I'm not a portrait artist. I don't enjoy doing them. I did take one. I sort of did one for free a year or two ago, maybe longer actually, just to sort of see how I felt about it, and I didn't enjoy doing it at all. They're just not for me. They take me a really long time, and even after a long time I get to a point where I sort of think I've not got the enthusiasm for this. Some people absolutely love doing them, and that's great, and they're much better at them than I am. They are something you need to practice a lot to get good at, and I'm not interested in doing them. Anyway, I like doing landscapes. I don't mind doing animals. Landscapes is the thing that gets requested most in terms of commissions. And like I say, I will work with the person to do that. If it's not something I think I can do, I will tell them, and I'll either say, I don't think I can do that, but I can do this. If you don't want to work with me anymore, that's fine. Here's some people that might be better to work with. Or some people say, oh, that sounds better. Sometimes people ask for things that isn't entirely realistic or possible. It's not often the case, but sometimes people will ask for example, they'll ask for a watercolour on a canvas. And obviously that is possible. You can paint in watercolour on canvas, but it has a very specific look to it. And quite often what they want is quite a traditional watercolour look. on a canvas, and that's not how traditional watercolours look. Traditional watercolours are generally on paper. So that's something where I sort of say, if you want it on canvas, it'll probably look like this rather than like this. What you actually want is it on paper and framed, and things like that. So anyway, all this is to say that if someone asks for a commission, I will work with them to get the best result for them. So that's what's happened with this latest one. And what I look for is, like, I've said this before, but if you're new to the channel and you won't have heard it, I look for something that draws you into the painting. And it's something, so amateur photographers will miss it out sometimes. This isn't a criticism, this is something to learn from. If you're taking a photograph, what makes something a good photograph is what draws you into it. And sometimes I get sent photographs where there's nothing pulling you into it. It's a bit flat, it's a bit of a flat image. And this one stood out to me because it's got the coastline pulling you in. Now this isn't the exact, this is a little bit cropped, this version of it, but it's got the coastline pulling you in, it's got quite a moody sky moving across it, and I felt like there was a lot that could be done with that. Now I'm not going to paint that image exactly as it is. For one, as you can see, this is a long thin canvas. That is not a long thin image. That's one. And also I'm going to do slightly different colours. When I saw that image, I thought that there's the potential to add a lot of colour into it. And the image also isn't as blue as that photograph is. It's quite a poor quality printout. But anyway, I had suggested to the person that it might make quite a nice triptych. So 3 long canvases next to each other rather than one big one. I felt like one big one, there'd be too much sky, there'd be too much sea. I felt like breaking it up into 3 would be quite nice. They thought about that, and then they came back and said, well, how about one long thin one? And I was like, yeah, that'd be perfect, that would work really well. So that's what we're going to do. And then colour wise, I said, it's nice, but I think there could be a lot more drama added to it. I think if it was blue, it'd be a bit flat, it wouldn't stand out, you'd forget it was on the wall. So I suggested that we could add a bit of orange to it, make the sky a bit more dramatic. So there is, I think, what. So this is the watercolour that I used just to sort of show them what I was thinking. So I'm thinking have a sunset here, which would be quite dramatic, moving into a darker, moodier sky over here. You could lighten up this side of the hill a little bit, and you can also add a bit of drama into the water as well. So that's the sort of colour reference almost for what I'm going to be painting. Now this painting will actually require a lot of layers. I was talking to a friend this week. I've been talking to a friend this week about getting started on a painting. They're brand new to it. They've just started giving it a go this week. They bought themselves some paints, some paper, some brushes, and they've been asking me questions, about the consistency of the paint, how to mix it, the brushes, the paper. They were having a bit of trouble with the paper at one point, and things like that. And I just sort of thought they're things to me that I know because I've learnt them, but they're not obvious to other people. And I thought I might just try and explain a few things when I'm getting started on this canvas. And one of the first questions was, is there a difference between watercolour and acrylic brushes? And are they doing something wrong if they use watercolour brushes with acrylic paint? Now, my answer would be, I said, I quite often use acrylic brushes for watercolour because I like acrylic brushes are generally much firmer. And they don't hold as much paint within them. You can't load them up as much. The paint sort of sits on them rather than in them. With a watercolour brush, the paint sits in the brush rather than on it, so it holds a lot more liquid with it. There was also a question about mixing paint. So they showed me the pack they'd got, and it wasn't too dissimilar from this, maybe a couple more colours in it. And they said, I've not got every colour, which... And they knew that wasn't a bad thing. They knew they could mix colours, but that's kind of just a point I wanted to touch on, was that I wouldn't buy every colour. In fact, I probably only have usually these colours because that's the basic set, and I will always have ochre as well. I use ochre more than I use the cadmium yellow as well. And I'll normally have a different, like a sage green in there too, that sort of colour. But other than that, you can mix your colour, and that's the point as well. When you're mixing your colour, what should you mix your colour on? So you don't mix it on your image, you want to mix it on the surface, and that surface should be something that isn't porous. most importantly. So don't mix onto paper or card or cardboard. Don't mix on something that's going to absorb your paint, because it'll dry it out really quickly. You'll get hardly any use out of it. You want something that's a bit shiny, not porous. So I use these disposable palette. So this is disposable paint palette. So it's like a waxy paper, and you can just peel that away, peel the layer away and throw it in the bin when you're done. But also you can just peel off, and you can see I've done it here. You can peel off the old paint, and you can get quite a lot of use out of these. I don't sit and peel off every little bit, obviously, but you know, you can reuse these to quite an extent as well. So when you're mixing, mix on something a bit plasticky or a bit waxy. And then there's a point on washing brushes. Now, like I said, if you're using, this person has possibly had this issue because I think they've used watercolour brushes with acrylic paint. So I think the brushes is probably overloaded. I think the brushes has probably got a lot more liquid in it than it usually would with watercolour. If you're washing watercolour paint off in water, it comes off very easily, very quickly. You hardly need to wash your brush. If you wash acrylic paint off, an acrylic brush, again, it comes off fairly easily because it's not holding too much. You do have to, like, you know, be a bit rough and like use a bit of paper towel as well to clean your brushes. So when you are cleaning your brushes, I always say, you know, get as much of the excess off on your palette as you possibly can. Wash your brush in the water, and then maybe give it a bit of a wipe with blue roll as well. And that just means that when you're going in to get your next colour, you're not contaminating the next colour. So I didn't think about this at the time, but this person said they were having a bit of a problem with having to wash the brushes and having to change the water after using every colour, which isn't something I have to do, but I think thinking about it, it's probably because they're using watercolour brushes with acrylic paint. So if you're watching, you know who you are. That's probably why that's happened, now that I've just thought about it. Anyway, the other thing is your surface. So I've got a canvas. You can see, canvas, lovely. You can obviously paint on paper, you can paint on canvas paper, you can paint on canvas board, you can paint on wooden board, you can paint on whatever you want. If you're going to paint on paper, it needs to be a good quality paper. You can't just use the paper that you get for putting in your printer. It's too thin, it's not designed for it, it's cheap, to be honest, as well. If you're going to paint on paper, you want a good quality paper, and you want to stretch it on a board, which means you need gum tape, which I keep meaning to do a video on. I'll do a video one day on how to stretch your paper. If I haven't already done it? No, I haven't done it. I'm sure I did it once. Anyway, so good quality paper, quite heavy paper. You stretch it with gum tape so that it doesn't wrinkle. That's how you stop your paper from wrinkling. If you're using canvas paper, again, I'd probably stretch that too, even though it's more durable and it's got a canvas feel to it, I'd still probably stretch it. If you're using canvas, so a stretched canvas on a board, a stretched canvas, which is what this is, it's on a frame, depends where you get your canvas from. You can get quite cheap canvases from places, and they sometimes feel a bit dusty on top, and that is because they're ready to use canvases. There's nothing wrong with that at all. They're fine, you can use them. They've already got like a coat of like gesso on them quite often as well. Sometimes if you give them a little wipe, like a little sand down with some really, really fine sandpaper, you'll find that actually improves the surface of them. Now, this canvas is a cotton canvas. There was nothing on it already, it was just a sheet of cotton stretched across the canvas. And what I've done is I've put a coat of gesso over the top of it, and that just gives me a nice grippy layer to paint on that isn't painting directly onto the canvas. So it means my paint isn't just going to get absorbed straight into the cotton, it's going to go onto the gesso, and it'll be much nicer to paint on. So that's a few things to think about. Maybe one day we'll do like I don't know, how to prepare your painting surface and things like that video together, but hopefully for now that's helpful. So the next thing, which brushes am I going to use? I've said already I'm going to use acrylic brushes for this, and I've got a couple of different sizes in front of me. So these are kind of my favoured brushes. These are just the brushes I use for everything. I've got quite a big one, which is like a bit washy. I use that normally for varnishing, so that'll probably just wait till the end until I'm varnishing the surface, until I'm varnishing the finished painting. I've got this, which is just a decorating brush that I use to put the gesso on. I might use it for a little bit of like a thin base layer maybe as well. And then the smaller ones and the in-betweens, I've just got these which are various shapes and sizes. I've got some that will be used for lines. This is a bit softer. I don't know if I'll use it, but I picked it up. I've got this. I really like using this brush. I don't know if I'll have much use for it in this painting, but I really like this brush. And I've got some tiny ones too, and they will get used much later on in the very finishing stages. They'll get used. And then I've also got just my palette knives. So good mix of things. This brush you'll have seen me use before. I use this for a lot of things. I use it for watercolour as well, actually. It is an acrylic brush, but I do use it for watercolours. I like it because it's got the edges, different edges. It's very versatile. You can use it for a lot of different things. And that's the sort of one that I go to for sort of painting. Not the base layer, but maybe the next layer up when I'm starting to add the detail and the light. That's the brush that will do most of the work on that. The palette knives I'll probably use for the sea quite a lot on this painting. Okay, so why am I painting a big base of yellow with this big washy brush, which smells a bit weird, by the way. When I opened it, it had a really weird smell to it. It's kind of calmed down a bit now, but anyway, that was a bit alarming. Why am I doing this big washy yellow? So that is because I always do yellow. Some people do different colours. Some people, you'll see a lot of people do like bright orange or even browns, reds, things like that. And I'm doing it because when I paint the next layer on, the layer of detail, this is quite a contrast to the blues that this image mostly is. So I'll be able to sort of see where the paint is thin, where I've missed, etc. And it just offers a nice contrast to what's coming next, really. And also, I'm doing it yellow and this colour because the light that's coming through in this ochre is what I'm doing it in, which I mentioned before. The light that I'm going to have coming through the sunset that I've done is going to be ochre. So if I do miss a bit, or if there are thinner bits, then it will play nicely into the idea that the sunset is breaking through the clouds and breaking through the dark, and there's little light patches hitting the surface. So that was one of the dogs has just got themselves under my little table and just had a little scratch, so she caused a mini earthquake there. So that is so I got a bit distracted. So that is why I'm doing it this colour. It's mostly for the light properties to it. Like I say, you'll see other people do it and they'll do browns, they'll do oranges, etc. So you can see what I've done here is I've put down the base layers for the sky, the water, and a little bit of the beach as well. I've not yet touched the mountain, the hill, whatever it is. I'm not sure. I don't think it's a mountain. No, it's not. It's a hill. And I'm not going to touch that until I finish the sky. And these aren't necessarily the colour it's going to be. These are more, they're almost like tonal guides rather than like the actual colour. The blue, the sea is probably a bit more accurate in the way I did that. I'm not sure if you could see it, but what I did is I mixed emerald green with ultramarine blue, which makes a really, really nice, like a really nice deep teal. And I put a bit of white on my palette as well. And I sort of just, I put them on a palette knife and I just like scraped it up with the palette knife and then just drew it along there. And then used a brush to make sure that there was a good spread across, like a good coverage. So while that won't be the finished surface, it does sort of give a bit of a guide, a bit of an idea as to how the water might sort of move and react. There will be in the water a bit of a reflection from this side of the sky as well, a little bit of sunshine reflection. But I need to paint the water surface as a whole first. Yeah, so like I say, so this is more of a sort of tonal, sort of base guide, base layer. As you can see up in, well, maybe you can't see it there actually, but up in the sky, you can still see the yellow pointing. And like I said, when I put the base layer down, that's not necessarily a bad thing if the yellow points through a little bit, pokes through, because it means that it's reflecting the sun. But it won't do, there will be more layers on top of there as well. So I also just thought it worth mentioning. So the friend that's been getting in touch about starting their new painting and knowing which brushes to use and whatnot, they also got in touch asking about, so they'd painted the background of the picture, they'd painted everything they wanted in it, and then they had something in the foreground that they wanted to add on to it, but they could no longer see the pencil marks they'd made as the reference. So they asked, should they draw, like how do they do it basically? How do they now see where they need to paint the thing that they wanted to paint? They wanted to paint a dog, I think, over the top. And they sort of said, should I have just left the background blank? Now, personally, I would have done this. I'd have left the background blank. So what I did is I painted my base layer, then I used the brown as the outlines, so I know where everything's going to be. And then I'd have painted everything in, and I'd have left the dog. If there was going to be a massive dog head here, I'd have left that blank. And I'd have painted the dog head last. And I'd have done that, first of all, so I could see the detail that I've drawn in, but also so that it pops out above everything else. So even if, say, I painted a full background here, I painted the mountain, painted everything, and then now I decide, so this is a finished painting, and then now I go, actually, do you know what? I want a massive dog's head in the middle of this. I want to paint a dog looking at me. I would paint the dog on top of everything, and I'd make sure it's the last thing I painted, because you want it to stand out, you want it to feel in the foreground. And you can do that more by making sure that it's the last thing you put on the canvas, and it almost develops its own little background. So if you were wanting to put flowers in, for example, flowers over here, you'd do that last. You'd paint the full painting and then put the flowers in. I know that some people like to have, like I said, the pencil marks and the guide. So if you are going to do that, you're probably not going to see, got a little end of a normal pencil there, a soft one. This is quite a soft pencil. If you were to draw in something that you wanted, if you put it on there, you can see it all right. If you put it on the blue again, you can see it all right. If you've got quite a dark colour, it'd be harder to see it. So if you do it with quite a soft pencil, it's all right. But if you've not got a soft pencil, you might want to do it with white chalk or a white pastel instead of, or maybe not if you're going to use a pastel, use a chalky pastel, not an oil pastel. So yeah, it depends. It depends how confident you are with freehanding something. I'm quite comfortable with just painting a dog on there, but you might not be. You might want the pencil marks on there. So that's just what I'd suggest. So with this painting, it's not nearly finished. This is the first. There's the base layer, there's the outlines, and then these are the reference layers, is what I call them. And this painting will have layers and layers and layers added to it. This isn't even nearly finished. It'll look so different by the time it is finished. And I'm going to do the sky first. That's going to get finished off first. Then I'll probably do, I'll do a good bit of this beach area and the sea. And I think once I've done the sea, I will then do the mountain, the hill, and the trees on the hill. And then I'll probably work a bit between the hill and the sea and the beach. The sky I'll completely finish and won't go back to it once it's finished, because it is the very, very back thing, so I don't need to. There is quite a bit of background image over here that I'll do quite early on too. Yeah, and I think, so I'll do even though I'll put the base layer down for the sea now, I'll probably finish with the sea. I'll probably finish on the sort of waves, the white waves. That'll probably be the last thing I put in, probably, because it's almost the bit I want to stand out the most. There are in fact a couple of little figures on the beach that the client, they're the client's family, so she wants them in there. She wants them to be they're really tiny little dots, but she wants them on the beach, so they'll probably be one of the later, they'll be one of the very, very final things as well that go on. So like I say, this isn't nearly finished. So when you're painting in acrylic, it's a bit, you playing two things off against each other. It dries very quickly, so you can paint much faster and you can get to the end product much faster. However, it dries very quickly, so you've not got a lot of time to play with the blending and the colours. You need to be able to do that quite quickly. What some people do is they spray with a little bit of water, just to keep it a bit, just to keep the paint active a bit longer. So as you're painting, if you just get a water bottle and do a little layer over the top of it, you can keep it active a bit longer. You can get mediums as well that you can mix into acrylic paint to make them dry a bit slower. But painting in acrylic paint does mean you can produce a lot of layers quite quickly, and that's why I like it. If you were working with oil, you'd probably paint, well, I don't really paint with oil very often. As you know, that if you've been following since the first video, that very first painting you saw is oil. It's still not finished. And it's got quite a lot of work left to be done on it. But that, if you do a layer and you're not intending to blend that layer, you have to leave it for quite a while and come back to it. So you do sort of have to work in a more methodical way over a longer period of time. Whereas acrylic, do a layer, leave it to dry. In fact, you could do this layer, you could do this corner over here, leave it to dry, do a bit down here, and then come back to that probably about 20 minutes later. So they are the sort of playoffs that you make. But I think what I've realised in talking to people that have recently started painting is that they don't realise that you're supposed to layer paint. You're not looking for the end result with the first coat. If you're not happy with something, you can keep adding to it. You can keep going. You know, it's not a case of it has to be perfect, and keep going over it. Like someone said to me the other day, what if you make a mistake? And it's like, well, fine, just paint over it and do it again, or change it. It's not like I could completely move the location of this hill with this paint. It's not, if I was working in watercolour, you can't do that. It's not how it works. If you're working in oil, you can do it, you just got to wait for it all to dry completely before you do it. Well, sort of. And then if I decided now that I wanted to change the location of that hill, or if I wanted to make it taller, or if I wanted to make it smaller, I can do that right now just by adding layers. So that's just something that that people aren't necessarily aware of when painting. Okay, so that's it for this week. Just to sort of, well, I've talked quite a lot about, I've shown you the last painting, I've shown you the start of this one. I'll keep you updated with this one, film it as I go along. And yeah, and I'll keep you updated with Masters things in the coming weeks too. And yeah, so that's it for now. And I'll see you next week. Bye bye.